In today's video, we are rescuing this Philodendron verrucosum and turning it into this in just 10 months. Hi everybody and welcome back to my YouTube channel. When I found a sad looking Philodendron verrucosum in the rescue section of my local nursery, I couldn't help myself but take it home. Growing plants, especially rescuing them, takes a little bit of time. In today's video I want to show you the journey the plant has gone through as part of this rescue mission, and then I want to share any tips and tricks with you. Hang on! This video took a long time to plan, film and edit, so I would really appreciate if you give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed already, I would really appreciate if you do. It's for free and it's by far the best way for you guys to support me. If you have subscribed already, thank you so much, but yeah, let's have a look at this rescue mission now. Alright, so I was doing kind of like nursery hopping today, so I was just going to a bunch of nurseries today, and one of them had this more or less beautiful Philodendron verrucosum at a really good price. It was $27, which is super affordable for Australia, especially given that this has 3 little plants in it, and I'll show you a bit better when I separate them. 3 years ago when I bought my now big Philodendron, it was tiny. It was like the same size of this tiny plant over here, and I bought it for 150 bucks. So they have definitely come down in pricing because I know they've been tissue cultured. And it's my absolute favorite plant of all time. So when I saw this, I was like, I can't not take it home with me. I'm a little angry at my current plant. It's grown too large. Like, I do think that verrucosum, like, it had its peak maybe like last year. I think it grew too large and it doesn't look that nice anymore. So when I saw this, I was like, you know what? Let's pick that up. So I can just grow a juvenile version of Philodendron verrucosum as well. Now I'm just going to remove it from the substrate. It smells like root rot a little bit, so I reckon not all roots are super healthy, but it's mainly because this substrate is basically just, it looks just like peat moss or cocoa peat. It doesn't really look great, and also when I picked it up from the nursery, I already noticed that it has mealybugs. So it's weird, I've never dealt with mealybugs before. I don't know why. I think it's probably the type of plants that I have are probably not so susceptible to mealybugs. Usually my verrucosum has spider mites. I've never had mealybugs on it. So I'm taking all of the substrate out of it, and I'm going to give the leaves as well as the root system a good soak. And yeah, honestly, I feel like at this price, it was so affordable. Obviously, I want to rescue it and I want to propagate it into many little bits, but I love, like, you know, getting a plant that is really cost effective because it allows me to experiment a little bit or like take more risks, let's say. So I'll chop this into single node cuttings, right? If I would have spent a whole lot of money on this, I would not take the risk and chop it into single node cuttings without it being air layered first. But at 27 bucks, I feel like I can take some risks, and usually as soon as you take risks, it will pay off. So I reckon I'll end up with lots and lots of verrucosums, but the more the merrier. So I've just removed the substrate. It was very dry. You can see that not all roots survived, so some of them ended up in here. And I mean, if you have a look at that substrate over here, it's super fine. It's not compacted yet, but you know that over time this substrate will compact. So I just wanted to get it into a better substrate, but it has a decent root system. Now the roots feel super dry as well, so I don't know how many of those will survive, but we will see. Alright, see over here there's like a mealybug kind of hidden in that hairy bit. I saw some more mealybugs. I picked some out already in the, see over here in between the stem and the petiole, just right behind my finger over here, there were some mealybugs here. They really like to hide in these little crevices, and I'm sure if I peel some of this off, there might be some hiding under there. So ideally, and I get something like that and I'm worried about it, I will definitely isolate it. But what I also do is I kind of pick off any of these bits that I feel like mealybugs could be hiding under. And I just discovered another 2 growth points here, so happy days. You can also see the cuticle is a little shriveled up. I think they let this dry out too much. Verrucosums really don't like drying out. So I reckon the next leaf will be damaged. Has nothing to do with what I'm doing. It's just that this leaf has already been damaged while it's been growing up. You just can't see it yet. All right. It actually, the mealybug situation isn't as bad as I thought it was when I first saw it, but given that it has all of these little hairs on the petioles as well, I better be safe than sorry. So to be honest, I'm just going to pick this out. So normally when I get a new plant, I don't necessarily treat it for pests. I just give it a spray with water, right? Like wipe everything off. If I don't see any pests being there, what am I treating? But because I know this has pests, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pop this into this box, and I use my trusted Confidor spray. So Confidor spray, it's like ready to use, and I usually use it for thrips. It's great for thrips, but I know that there's a mealybug on here as well. So apparently it's good for mealybugs as well. As I mentioned, I've never had mealybugs, so I can't speak from experience, but fair enough. I'm going to do this outside just to, to eliminate the spray going everywhere. All right, sweet. And disclaimer, be better than me, wear a mask, wear gloves, and so on. Read the instructions, be better than me, okay? Great, are you gonna do the rest of the video? 5 o'clock, the baby gets dinner. So let me do my work. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna chop it in between every single node, just because I can. So there's a 3-node cuttings, and then see over here, so this was where I just chopped off the growth point, and there's one here, and there is one here, which I just kind of snapped off. Doesn't matter, teeny tiny. And then let's look at the other one. Should I just snap that off as well? Let's go. Oh, also very little roots. That's okay. Cut this. As I said, I'm happy to experiment with this a little bit. And then the last one, I'll just keep those two. Should I? No, you know what? Might as well. Let's go all in, all out. Who cares? So this is the actual plant with the root system. So that one I will pot up in here. I have some of my aeroid mix, but I actually added a lot of tree fern fiber to it because I know that verrucosum specifically, smaller plants, they like it a little bit more moisture retentive, and I've heard great things about tree fern fiber. I have a separate video on this. By the time you see this, you should have seen the tree fern fiber video already. And if not, then sorry. But basically, tree fern fiber has great water retention, but at the same time, it will ensure aeration. So, happy days. So I just potted that up. You can see that mix is much finer than my normal aeroid mix. And I'll just give it a quick watering. Alrighty, so while this is draining, I wanna propagate the other plants. They are all single node cuttings. Ideally, I'd let the cut dry out a little longer, but not today. Again, if you have more time, I just don't have that much time today. I want to get this done and move on to the next project. If you have more time, give these cuts a couple of hours to dry out before you put them in your preferred medium. Now, I know some people also like to use some like rooting hormones or rooting gels and so on. I have propagated a lot of Philodendron verrucosums in my lifetime, and I have never used any rooting assistance. And at this stage, I do have a 100% track record with propagating verrucosums in moss. So I'm going with let's not fix what's not broken, and I'll keep propagating them in moss. So I really just take a little bit of moss, I wrap it around the node, and then I move on to the next one. Bit of moss around your node. Next one, little bit of moss, and then I'll just stick it in here. Honestly, there's no no real method to my madness. Just take the node, a bunch of sphagnum, chuck it in there, done. Alright, this is, I have no idea where I got the see-through pot from. It's slightly different. I think it's like an orchid pot. Actually, I think I got it from the plant fair last year. This also has aeration on the side, but it's still see-through, so I will see when there is success. Alrighty, now that's all I got to do today. Now, verrucosums have really fine roots, so sphagnum moss is my preferred way of propagating. Most of my other, like all of monsteras and so on, are usually propagate in water, but with philodendrons, specifically velvet ones, I've had really good experience propagating them in moss, so why not keep doing it? Now, normally if I bring a plant home, I'm pretty quick to integrate them into my normal collection because I don't have that much room to like properly isolate plants, but because I know I found mealybugs on this one and I don't necessarily want to push my luck too much, I'm going to keep this in the box. Let me take the one that I potted up. That's the one that I potted up. It was just draining in the sink, so I popped that in this box as well. I'm not worried about any of these leaves, right? So these leaves kind of touching the top of the box now. Yeah, that's not good for the leaf, but these leaves will die. These leaves are already pretty ugly, to be honest. I'm just using these leaves to help the plant establish a root system, and then hopefully the plant will suck all of the energy out of the leaves, put it into a root system, and then push out new growth, right? I'm waiting for the new growth. The new growth is going to grow in my conditions, with my care, and hopefully they'll look pretty. I'm not trying to save the existing leaves. I'm just using the existing leaves to save the plant. To save a plant, you gotta establish a root system. And I mean, I have one root system, but I just cut another 6 plants from it without a root system. So now these 6 plants, was it 6? Maybe 7 even, I forgot to count, but they need to establish a root system first. Now, good news is we're going into the colder season over here in Australia, and Philodendron verrucosum is a high altitude cloud forest aeroid. But what does that mean? It's usually colder and very humid in these cloud forests. So going into the colder season is usually when my verrucosum is the happiest, so that's good news. And then the high humidity is, well, we have pretty high humidity in Sydney at all times, but keeping it in a prop box, well, there's gonna be like 100% humidity or like 90% humidity in here. So that's also gonna help it recover as quickly as possible. The only thing I need to be careful with is airflow, because obviously there's no airflow, so it's gonna encourage mold growth, fungal diseases and so on. So I do need to air it out every now and then. Probably gonna just have a quick look into it every day. But again, you know, no risk, no fun, and I'm willing to take a few risks with that because it was a bit of a bargain in the first place. And anyway, I'll pop this into a bright spot. So I do want it to get a lot of light. And I want it to still be warm, right? So I'm aiming around 18 degrees Celsius, I reckon. It doesn't need 30 degrees, so I don't need to pop it in my IKEA cabinet. It's happy in my IKEA cabinet, but I don't want the mealybugs to spread. Alrighty, I found a spot. So these are my west-facing windows. They're the windows that get the most sun, even during winter, because the sun sets in the west. So I'm just gonna put it all the way in that corner over there, so it's not going to annoy me because it's obviously ugly, right? I don't like having these things, but I'm just going to put it there. Then I'm just going to put this anthurium kind of in front of it. So you can't even see it's there, but it's kind of hidden there, and all I need to do is just lean over once a day, quickly lift up the lid just to get a bit of exchange of air in there. And we're back. 1 month ago, I rescued this Philodendron verrucosum, and it's been in this prop box ever since. I honestly just air it out maybe like once a week. I actually fully forgot about it existing for a little bit. I haven't watered those plants since I first watered them and put them in here because I keep the lid closed. I actually have a little bit of a gap but the lid is mainly closed. You can see the condensation on the side of the box. It's definitely super humid in there. It's also not super hot at the moment, right? We're going into autumn, or we're actually in winter now. So it's not super hot, so plants don't use all too much water. So I had pretty much very low effort with this, right? Since the initial video that I filmed, I didn't do anything. Maybe I did water this once. It seems very wet. I don't remember. Maybe I might have sprayed this once with a little bit of water, but I definitely haven't even taken it out of the box. I would have just taken this pressure sprayer and just sprayed it. It seems very moist still, but I suppose, yeah, where's all of the moisture going? Anyway, now I'm gonna come a bit closer so I can show you the updates. Okay, let's start off with the main plant that I potted up. So see, this is a new shoot. So that shoot wasn't there before, so it is definitely happy. Obviously the actual leaf is kind of fading a little bit, so it's really dirty from the tree fern fiber as well. It's obviously fading, but that's okay. I just want this leaf to give it enough energy to grow a new leaf, but I want new pretty leaves. I can't really see any roots sticking. I mean, I see roots, but I think those were the roots that were already there. I can't really see any super nice new roots. Might actually retain a little bit too much moisture, to be honest, but I mean, it's growing, so I'm not complaining, but I'm definitely not in a rush to water this anytime soon. And then we've got the propagations, and this might already be a new leaf. I don't even remember, but look at this. We've got growth here, we've got growth here, or like new growth points, but most importantly, we have these crazy roots. So this growth point at the top here, look at these roots that it has sent out. See how nice and fluffy these roots are over here? And they've gone all into the pot. So lots of roots within the pot over here. I hope the reflection is not too crazy. But lots of roots. Obviously the leaves are suffering from this, right? Let's also have a quick look. I can't see any mealybugs, which is a good sign. So I don't think they've come back. So that's great. I think best thing for me to do is just pop it back in the box. Close the lid and forget about it for another month or two. We're gonna check in. I'm not in a rush to pot these up. You know, I'd rather propagate them for a little bit longer and then give them the best chances of surviving when I take them out of this box. So I want them to have as big of a root system as possible. I'd also love to see some new growth actually already, so that I can actually chop off all the ugly leaves and then put it on a new pole and already have some new leaves and not just look at the ugly ones. So while they're still ugly, I'll just keep them in the box so I don't really have to look at them, and then just put the box in a corner and I'll try and forget about it. So I'll see you when it's ready. Alrighty, we are back and I genuinely forgot about it. It's been 3 weeks since the last clip that you've seen, and I haven't opened the box in those 3 weeks. Hello, Bradles. You gonna help me inspect what's happening? Are you creating suspense for the viewers? You're hiding the results? So I think it's been overall about 2 months since I bought this plant or rescued this plant. So let's assess if today's the day to maybe pot it up on a moss pole. Okay, first things first, this is the little base. Oh my god, it has pushed out the cutest leaf. And is pushing out another leaf here, or like a caterpillar over here. Now this has been potted up in tree fern fiber, and I can't really see any proper roots pushing to the side of the pot, but verrucosum roots are honestly the most disappointing looking ones anyway. So I'll probably, oh, there's a root coming here. Oh, and it looks like a second shoot. Can you see that? Looks like a second shoot coming from a node buried down below, and definitely some nice root action over here. Alright, that's the first one. And then over here, all the propagations. I don't think I had a new leaf yet. No, but look at all the roots. So I really need to pot this up. This one was pushing against the lid, and I reckon it's damaged a little bit. So it's just outgrowing the little prop box, but look at that root over here. And then look at the roots in this pot. It's pretty well rooted. So I reckon I want to take this out, pot it up, put it on a pole and see how we go. Obviously these leaves are deteriorating more and more. I actually expected worse, but their purpose is really just to assist the propagation. They will definitely deteriorate. Maybe this leaf is new. I don't know if this leaf was here before. Let's take this out of here and see how well the root system really is. And I'm trying to do this very gently. Like, I didn't compress the moss previously, so this should be pretty easily. Brett, you're on fire today. What's going on? Brett, you're hiding. You're blocking the view again. You don't care, huh? Just really slowly removing any moss that seems to just be loose and not attached to any roots. It's going to be messy because there's like 4 or 5 cuttings in there. Their roots could all be tangled up as well. Alrighty, we've got the first little cutting. Doesn't have the best root system, but it has a root system. 1 root here, 1 root there. Good luck. Ooh, awesome. Okay, this is getting better down here. Alright, this is a good one. So we've got 2 roots over here on this cutting and already a new shoot over there. So, happy days! Oh, this one's messy. Alrighty, next cutting has also 2, 3 roots down there. Actually, 3. Yeah. Yes! Which means that the majority of the root system must belong to this, huh, Anna? So, oh my god, how many cuttings were in there? Beautiful. Also 2 roots and a new shoot over there. Perfect. Alrighty, so this is the tip cutting. It has 3 roots at that top node over here. That bottom node also has 2 roots and it has grown a second shoot down here. So I've got the growth point here, but the second shoot coming here. And I've noticed verrucosum does this quite frequently, where it actually shoots in multiple spots. So I've always had a lot of propagation success with verrucosum, easy to multiply. Awesome, another one with 4 independent roots and new growth point over here. So they all look, apart from the first one was a little tricky, or like, first one might not be a success, but I think I don't want to wait any longer. I'm over this. And yes, I will reuse the moss for something else. I'll just let it dry, put it in the sun maybe. Alrighty, so the game plan is I'm going to pot it up in a 14 centimeter pot. I'm going to give it a grow vertical moss pole. But I'm not going to fill it with moss, so it's just a grow vertical pole. I'm going to use my aeroid mix in the pot, and I'm going to use a combination of tree fern fiber and perlite in the pole itself, because these verrucosum roots love water, and they're pretty finicky. They really don't want to dry out, and tree fern fiber seems to be having the best mix of aeration and water retention and drainage and everything. Tree fern fiber, mwah. And yes, I'm going to pop them all on the same pole because verrucosums have very small internodal spacing, which means that if you just have one plant on there, it might look a little boring. If you have multiple plants on there, it will fill in the gaps quite nicely. So yeah, and that's the whole idea. I wanted to rescue this plant to create a lush pole, not to create 800 small poles. That's kind of too much. So yeah, there was another shoot at the bottom over here, so that's good. That's a double shoot now. Roots look okay. I just gently pull on them. It's hard to assess by their color because they're really dark, fine roots anyway. That doesn't mean that they're not healthy. So I just gently pull on them to see if they are solid or mushy. That looks good. I'm just trying to remove some of the substrate. So good, decent root system. Okay, now we can start potting it up. So let's start with the actual potting aspect. So I'm just gonna have 1, 2, Oh, this one's gonna be the one in the middle. Let's put this one in the middle. 3, 4, 5. Wow, okay. Alright, so I got them all in here. I know it's quite a small pot for all of these plants, but if you look at the root system, there isn't that much of a root system there for now. So I think I'll just keep them in here. Eventually I'll give them a larger pot once I see that they've settled into this one. So let's add the moss pot to that as well. Whoop, it's getting messy in here. So I made the airwood mix quite tree fern fiber heavy as well, again because of the nice water retention that the verrucosum appreciates. Alright, absolute chaos. I just want to find this growth point over here. Now to the second part, the part that's gonna be a little messier, which is filling the pole with tree fern fiber. And to do that, just open up the pole and I'll just fill it up. Now this is messy and I should really be doing this outside, and I also think based on the framing you probably can't even see me. So let's speed this up. And for the pole, I only mix the tree fern fiber with perlite. So it has even better water retention than the chunky airwood mix, because obviously it's in a pole, so it has much more surface area than the pot, so it's going to dry out quicker. So I'm going to assist it drying out a little less quick. And this is not my first tree fern fiber pole. And from experience, when you first initially fill it, it gets very, very messy, but it then kind of locks it all in place itself when you water it for the first time. And it gets less messy over time. Alrighty, here we go. Let me bring you closer. Right, so I just got these 5, 6 cuttings in here. Completely ignore the existing leaves, that doesn't matter. Alrighty, cleaned up a little bit. So we're definitely still in it looking a little shabby territory, but I think we're setting it up for success. So we just need to give it a little bit more time, and I am trying to give this really, really good conditions as well, similar to before. Now it's too tall to go back in the box. So I'm gonna put it in my IKEA cabinet because that also has really high humidity. So it should reduce the shock for this plant going from this really high, beautiful environment in the box, going back into the cabinet. So I'll pop it in there and I will see you with an update soonish. Oh, before I pop it in there, of course I give it water. And we're back. It's been a month and I've seen some nice growth, so I thought I'd give you a quick update. So maybe let me just bring it a bit closer so we can see it a little better. So the top shoot has pushed out this leaf over here. Love it. So pretty. Nice backside and some little bit of fur on the petiole already. Second shoot is also giving me a new leaf right now. This leaf was also new on the third shoot, and then I don't know if you can see that, but there's another shoot coming here, another one here, another one here, and a tiny one down here as well. So it's getting messy in here. Well, and by messy, I mean lush. I mean, that's exactly what I want. But now that I've got some new growth, I think I'm in a position to start cutting off some of these older, ugly ones, just because I hate the way they look. But of course, at the same time, they can still contribute to photosynthesis. So I don't want to cut too many, but it's getting a bit cramped in the IKEA cabinet. Yeah, I'll just pop it back into the IKEA cabinet and let it do its thing. And I suppose I might see you again in a month or so when there's something to report back on. So see you soon. Update time. So it has been 4 months since I picked up this plant for rescue and it is growing so nicely. I'll have to come closer. But let's maybe start with the bottom, and there's definitely a lot of glare, but I do think you can start seeing some roots coming through. And here, not as many as I would expect, but I know, and AJ's gonna hate on me for not taking the sticker off, but I know that verrucosums have honestly the most disappointing root system, so I'm not super surprised. Now, these are all of the old leaves, the ones that I used to propagate this plant, and they are still okay, but definitely slowly losing it. But that's okay, because look at all of this growth. Some are a little bit smaller, and that's to be expected because they're very much at the bottom of the cabinet and they're actually getting shaded by the leaves above. This one is quite pretty. And if you can see some debris on there, don't worry, there's not thrips. This is actually fallout from the moss, from the tree fern fiber. But these leaves at the top, they're, oh my god, very messy, sorry. These leaves at the top, I'm really in love with them. They really have this beautiful color and sheen that I really, really love in a verrucosum. Now, one issue I have with this plant is this is what it looks like from the front. You can pretty much just see the pole. That's because I currently have it inside my IKEA cabinet where the light comes right from above. So obviously these leaves start facing the light. So I think over the next month or so, the IKEA cabinet is way too busy, by the way. Anyway, I really need to start moving a few plants out of there. So I reckon then it's time for me to just put it in front of a window so that all of these leaves start facing the window, and then it can look something like this, which will be much nicer. I just wanted to put it in the cabinet for a little bit longer, just to get it to establish a few more roots, give these bottom shoots a little bit more time to catch up. And if these top shoots keep climbing that fast, I might actually cut them and propagate them further to give the rest of the plant a little bit of time to catch up. I really want there to be like 4 or 5 decent shoots on this pole, because verrucosums have this huge internodal spacing, like this much internodal spacing. So each vine is probably only going to have 3 or maximum 4 leaves on this pole in the first place. But from an update perspective, we are 4 months into the rescue mission, and I don't think this looks like a rescue plant anymore, right? This looks like a full-on lush little display. Definitely getting there. So yeah, excited to see where this is going with the beginning of spring approaching, or like actually today is the beginning of spring, so let's see what this plant is gonna do. And we are back. It has now been exactly 6 months since I initially rescued this plant, so I think about a month or so since we last spoke. Hey, down, yeah, front row seat for you, yeah. Mwah. So yeah, anyway, about 6 months, this plant has had spider mites again, so I treated it with the little bit of Vitality Plus that I have left, and it seems to be okay now. Now, since I also moved this out of my IKEA cabinet and into the office with all of the other velvet philodendron, and because this was at the very bottom of my IKEA cabinet before, I actually think it's getting more light now in my room from the mother grow lights. Also, the mother grow lights are coming from the front, so straight away you can see how these leaves are all facing forward, giving it a much nicer display side if you compare it to previous, where all of the leaves were kind of facing up a little bit. But you can see how long these petioles have grown down here. That was really where I think it was just looking for light in the IKEA cabinet, whereas these petioles over here, the newer ones, are much, much shorter. So definitely a good decision to move it out of the IKEA cabinet. Now, there are still a few shoots down here at the bottom, and they seem to be having like 2nd or 3rd growth points showing as well. I also think that is a result of me moving it out of the IKEA cabinet. Previously the light came from the front, so this bottom section wouldn't really have gotten any light. Now that the light is coming from the front, it's all good. There is definitely a little bit of visual damage that you can see. That is due to the spider mites. Maybe this is a bit low humidity, I'm not too sure. Probably a combination of both. But overall, it hasn't really suffered all too much moving it out of the IKEA cabinet. I think it suffered more based on the spider mites in the first place. But the newest leaf over here seemed to be bigger and prettier than ever, with shorter petioles and also hairier petioles. Let me show you. You can see these are much hairier and beautiful leaves. Look at that sheen. So really, really happy with those. Using the tree fern fiber in the pole was an okay decision. I think in hindsight I would prefer moss because I am actually planning on keeping it indoors. So the tree fern fiber makes the watering a little bit messier, but I suppose the real benefit of using tree fern fiber would only crystallize when I eventually want to take the pole down or cut it and so on. Tree fern fiber would be much easier to remove from the roots than moss. With verrucosums, they are definitely spider mite magnets. I'm definitely not aiming at completely eliminating any spider mites. I just need to be on top of treating them. Again, I'm using Vitality Plus, which has actually now been discontinued. So I'm on the hunt for something new if you have any recommendations. But ultimately, I also just want to normalize having pests. Like, yes, there's probably right now at any time in my plant journey, there's some plant that has some sort of pest issues. That is just perfectly fine as long as the pest issues don't escalate. It's okay. And if you have a happy and healthy plant because it's growing in good conditions, the plant in itself should be able to deal with some of these pest issues anyway. We're back! It's been about 6 weeks since the last update and I moved house. And myself, Bradley, I think he's somewhere there under the table. Got his tail and leg hanging out. Anyway, myself, Bradley, as well as all of my plants are super happy at the new place. I thought it was time to give you a little update on this plant. It's now in my office, actually just receives natural light, but a lot of it. Specifically, it's getting a lot of afternoon sun, but during the day, it's still getting really, really nice, bright, indirect light from a south-facing window. So you can see these internodal spaces down here have become really, really short, despite the fact that the leaves themselves are getting bigger. I suppose that is just because the plant is getting sufficient light. So, you know, other signs of insufficient light is usually really long internodal spacing, long petioles, small leaves, mediums not drying out and so on. So that's how I know I'm giving this plant enough light. The other thing is it is much more, the red on the back of the leaves as well as kind of the pattern at the front is getting much more intense. Now this is usually something that comes with maturity as well, but also with maturity, as the plant climbs, it usually gets access to more light in the first place. So I do think there is a direct correlation between the light exposure and how much red the plant has, at least from my experience. Anyway, enough talk, let's address the obvious. This plant has started to grow off its moss pole, which I don't like. I'm usually really on top of my plants when it comes to these things because this is just a lost opportunity for this plant to mature. There are some aerial roots over here and they have nothing to attach to. I want him to attach to a medium. I want him to grow not just into aerial roots, I want it to grow into a proper root system that can absorb water and nutrients and get this plant the best ability to mature as quickly as possible. So I've got to put an extension on this plant. Now, normally when I extend my moss poles, I would also pot it up into a larger pot, but there aren't all too many roots inside of this pot just yet. It's not very root bound at all, so I'm thinking maybe I don't need to. But I want to switch from this mix of tree fern fiber and perlite to a regular pole with moss in it because it was just a little too messy. The initial thought was that I put it in the greenhouse and let it grow there, but I think it's actually too hot in the greenhouse for it. This is a high altitude cloud forest philodendron, so it wouldn't appreciate really high temperatures. So I got it inside, and because it is just my favorite plant of all time, I love verrucosums, and the nice red backs It's actually sitting on my desk in my office, so I get to see the red backs all the time. So I want to keep it there. But it's getting a bit too messy watering it with the tree fern fiber, and the plant hasn't attached to it as nicely as I would want it to. So I want to go back to my trusted moss. So I pre-filled this already. It's a Grow Vertical moss pole. As always, I have a link in the what's it called? Description down below. Now, what I'm probably going to do is I'm probably going to overlap this by 2 holes, right? So these poles are just cable tied, the bottom one are left empty, but I'm probably going to undo this one so that it overlaps. By me overlapping them, I'm also kind of hoping I don't need to use a garden stake to give it additional structure, but I might just have to give her a larger pot just so she has a bigger surface to stand on, so she doesn't get all too wobbly. Okay, see what I mean? These aren't really attaching as well as I would want them to. And see how many things just fall out of there when I move it around. Yeah, which is okay. Now, I don't necessarily want to mix the substrates. Or like, it's gonna look a bit weird, but I suppose it will eventually outgrow that pole, and then I'll put the next pole I'll put in there will also be just moss and so on. I wouldn't necessarily do it the other way around, because now if I water the moss, just water is gonna drip from the moss into the tree fern fiber. If it was the other way around, the moss pole at the bottom would just get so filthy from all of the little particles that would come off of the tree fern fiber. But I've had good experiences with tree fern fiber, specifically with smaller plants and specifically in my IKEA cabinet, but the verrucosum just, I don't know, it didn't seem to really take to it all too well. Like, it just seemed not interested. Oop, see what I mean? This just flopped over. Okay, I just need to do this side first. I know you can't see this, but I just need to do this now. Okay, the first ones are usually the hardest, and then obviously now that has a little bit more structure. Over here, connecting the 2 mesh pieces. Okay, look at this. The last 1, 2, 3 nodes have not attached. That is just pissing me off, because that to me is just such a waste of potential. You know what I mean? Anyway, that's not what I want. Verrucosums already have a hard time maturing. Verrucosums already have a hard time growing a large root system. So I really need every node to cooperate over here. And currently they're just not. I also have a much easier time hooking these wires into moss. Like, they seem to just stick better in moss. Don't you fall. Can't find more wire, so I'm just going to use a piece of twine. And then I'll just take it here. And just that way I can pin all vines to the pole at the same time. Yeah, the wire pieces don't really hold in the tree fern fiber. They come out too easily, so I really want to keep it in that small pot though. And what I need to do is I need to find a pot that is a snug fit. This one has too much wiggle room. So let me park that on the floor. The lower it is, the less height I got to fall from, and I'm gonna try and find a better pot. Alright, a little bit better, not 100% happy. I also think the table was crooked in the first place, but it has slightly less wiggle room, a little bit, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but I think this is better. Anyway, I will see how I go. If I feel like it's not gonna be stable enough in the long run, then I will eventually just give it a larger pot. But because this is standing on my desk, I'm trying to use a small surface area so that I have more desk space, I suppose. Alrighty. Anyway, that's it for today's update. We will check in again once there's something to share. Right, just in case you're curious, this is whereabouts it is. It definitely looks a bit odd on the desk now with the extension. Not the best look, but oh well, it is what it is. The plant likes that spot. Beautiful, and here we are. We're actually just shy of 10 months, but the plant has reached the top of its moss pole, so I thought it would be a good time to wrap up this rescue mission or rescue video. Now, there's about 6 shoots on this pole, but only 3 have actually made it to the top. 1 has actually outgrown the moss pole over here already, so it's probably time for yet another extension very soon. The other one is just unfurling a new leaf over here. And the third one, hang on, this is the newest leaf of the third one that has just unfurled as well. So very happy with the 3 that have reached the top of the moss pole. The bottom of the moss pole, there's 3 stuck down here, and I reckon they're just a little bit behind because the larger leaves were taking up most of the light. But now that the light source is coming more from the front, these should catch up at the bottom as well, hopefully. I really like how this is now displayed with all of the leaves facing forward, and that is just a result of the way that it's positioned in my room. So let's talk about the room, and let's talk about the conditions that this plant is currently growing in as well. It is just relying on natural light from a south-facing window. Keep in mind I'm in the southern hemisphere, so it would be the north equivalent if you're in the northern hemisphere. So it's kind of the perfect bright indirect light. I get the tiniest bit of direct sun exposure in the very late afternoon, specifically in the middle of summer, but that will also kind of reduce as we go into winter. So it's really just bright indirect light for this plant, but I can tell that it is sufficient light purely based on the continuous increase in leaf size, as well as having much shorter petioles. If I compare that to the long petioles you saw growing at the beginning of the video when they were still inside my IKEA cabinet. It is just relying on natural humidity in the room. There's a lot of plants in that room, so naturally the humidity is quite high because of all of the plants. But I don't supplement. Now the humidity changes with the weather. If it's a really dry day, then it will also be drier inside. If it's been raining for days non-stop, then obviously the humidity is going to be pretty through the roof in there. But I would say on average it's around about 60%. Now, not all philodendron need a really super high humidity environment, but I've noticed with Philodendron verrucosum specifically, they do like the higher humidity. They're not necessarily the biggest fan of super high temperatures, but it kind of gets up to like 27 or so in that room. And well, I haven't had a winter over here yet, but I'm assuming it will go down to about 16, 17, 18. I mentioned before that these plants grow in high altitude cloud forests in nature, so they're not necessarily hating on the cooler temperatures, but I've actually had the best growth over the spring and summer at the moment. But I think this is more a result of, well, this plant being established by then, right? The more established the plant is, the easier of a time it has to grow. But most specifically, I think it's the light exposure that really made it thrive so much over the last few months compared to the beginning of the journey. So don't think the temperatures in themselves really played a role over here, but it is one of those where I'm not necessarily concerned about cooler temperatures over winter. Obviously we're not talking about like frost or like 5 degrees or whatever. It's still in an indoor environment, so my house should not necessarily go below 16, otherwise I would be very, very unhappy as a person, right? Definitely prefer the moss in the pole over the airrod mix. I think it's just much cleaner, much neater. I'm personally having a better time watering it and assessing the watering need, but that could just be my bias because I've been using moss for, I don't know, like 4 years now, so I'm very in tune when it comes to moss poles. I know kind of how long they can keep moist for, and have my, you know, squeeze technique where I can kind of assess how moist the moss is and so on. So it's just become second nature. Hello, Bradley. It's just become second nature for me. So obviously I prefer what comes easy to me. But the airrod mix wasn't terrible, but you saw in that update when I put the extension on it, there was multiple nodes that did not actually grow into the pole. Now that could also be my fault. It could be that I didn't care for this sufficiently and that's why it didn't grow into the pole. Every single node of the plant attaching to the pole is essential for chop and extends to work. So I'm glad that the top part that I will use for chop and extends eventually is in moss, because every node has thoroughly rooted into the moss, whereas it didn't do the same with the aeroid mix. Just my observation, but if you can't get your hand on moss, then aeroid mix or cocoa chips and so on inside the pole is still better than nothing. Verrucosums are spider mite magnets, and I do think keeping them in a high humidity environment can help. But ultimately, I think we need to be realistic. You will eventually have spider mites on your verrucosum. It's very unlikely that you'll never have to deal with this problem. So it's more about how do we deal with this problem. Now, I prevent spider mites from really having a field day by just keeping the plants clean. So I would take this into the shower or into the garden and I just hose it down as often as I can, right? Realistically, I don't get to it as often as I should because I just have so many plants, but this is something you could be doing with every watering, right? Take it outside, give it a nice little rain shower. The water is not necessarily going to treat or kill the pests, but they're stopping the pests from really settling in and like having a field day, if that makes sense, right? So already that is preventing most of the pest issues. But if I do notice too many pests, specifically spider mites, I use Vitality Plus. Now, Vitality Plus has unfortunately been discontinued. I still have a big bottle that I bought back in the days, and I'm still using that because I hardly ever actually have the need to do proper pest treatment. So it's lasted me a few years now. But it's been discontinued, so if you're looking for a new product that you can buy right now, unfortunately I have no solution to offer. But if you do, leave a comment down below. Now, I have tried neem oil as well, and some people say neem oil works great, some say it doesn't work at all. I think it just really depends on what you're trying to achieve. I think if you're aiming for pest eradication, aka the pest will never ever come back, then no, neem oil is definitely not the solution. I don't think there is a solution for eradicating pests, right? I think they will always find their way back. So for me, it's more how do we manage pests on an ongoing basis rather than trying to eradicate them. And my management approach to pests is really just cleaning my plants so that they can't even really establish in the first place, if that makes sense. Now, verrucosums have a very disappointing root system, and we saw that throughout the updates, right? Like there is still, right now with 6 plants, there's not that much of a root system to show for in this pot over here. I hope you can see that with the glare of the sun. But considering that there's 6 plants and 3 of them are pretty high up already as well, like this is a pretty disappointing root system. And I've noticed that with all verrucosums, even my big mother plant. So it has a very disappointing root system, and they're very fine, skinny roots. So when you treat them, when you water the moss pole, you really don't want this to dry out. It is nothing like a Monstera deliciosa, for example, with really thick succulent roots almost, right, that can tolerate drying out much more. This plant will suffer a lot if it's drying out, and it won't necessarily recover from it like a Monstera would. So I constantly keep the pole moist. I do not let this dry out at all, and that same goes for the substrate, right? The moss pole, or the moss in itself, is really just a growing medium. It's just in a vertical pole rather than in a horizontal pot. I hope that the updates in themselves and just seeing the plant in itself is hopefully doing most of the talking. So I hope this was a valuable video, and hopefully it encourages you to rescue a plant as well and grow it into a nice lush pole, or try something new, try a new medium, try a new growth approach or something like that. If you're rescuing a plant and you're not spending all too much money on it, I suppose there's less risk involved, or you might be willing to take more risks and so on. Anyway, I think it's time for me to wrap it up, so I'll say goodbye. Thank you so much for watching. Like, subscribe, and leave a nice comment, and I'll see you next time. Bye!